birth is defined as something that happened to us. And we feel that was my father's responsibility. He had a dirty gleam in his eye and went after my mother and so on, and he did it. Yes, all right.
Because there is this point about responsibility. And one way of looking at it is that we are really not responsible for what happened to our past. We are responsible for what happened to us beginning right now.
Yes.
But we're not responsible for what happened to us before.
No, but you see, I feel this is a hoax.
So I'd like to hear your thoughts.
You see, look, let's suppose now that we'll follow the theory of those astronomers who maintain that the universe is not a steady state thing, but there was an enormous bang billions of years ago, and from this bang all the galaxies were thrown out into space. Now, then you look back at this as something which happened in the past and which is, as it were, the cause of the present. But what I would say is that bang is still going on. When you take a lovely bottle of black ink and throw it as hard as you can at a white wall and smash it, all it goes swoosh like this, you know. And in the center it's dense, but on the out fringes it has all kinds of interesting curlicues. And that's all, you see, one splash. Now, in the same way, we are at the moment sitting in this room and talking and thinking. We are all the little curlicues out on the end of the original cosmic bang. We are it. We are not effects of it. Because to think that you are separate from the Big Bang is simply a matter of definition. It's a way of talking. We separate events from each other in order to measure them. That is to say, the notion that there are distinct things and distinct events in the physical world is a calculus. It is like pretending that a curve is a series of points. And so, in the same way, supposing you have a wiggle. Now, you've got a wiggly line, you see, and the whole world is wiggly lines. Clouds, mountains, people, rivers, everything is wiggly lines. Now, how much of a wiggly line is a wiggle? You see, what is one wiggle? And you can see that this is a very arbitrary matter. So we see the more obvious wiggles in the world, and we define them as people. Each of you is a wiggle. And this wiggle is you.
I'd like to ask you about one wiggle. What about the wiggle of the child fighting to get out of the uterus through the birth canal and be born?
Yeah.
How do you view that in the general...
Well, that's simply a repetition of the original explosion.
Is he a participant right then and there?
Of course.
Or...
Of course.
Do you view this... This is a natural expression of the entire Earth?
Yes, exactly. This is a repetition of the original explosion. Go, man, you see? And...
so then responsibility would start with...
It starts with...
At birth, really.
It starts before birth. Because the definition of yourself as beginning only... When shall we put it? Where did you begin? When? At parturition? At conception? Or when you were an evil gleam in your father's eye? When did you begin? Let's go back. You began on the first dawn of creation, whenever that was. That's because you did it. See, everybody's pretending they didn't. And you can kind of play a game. This is what gurus do, you see, Zen masters and so on. They give you a funny look. And you say, well, I have a problem. Please, teacher, I'm this little me, and I'm caught in this thing called life. I got mixed up with all these tubes and nerves, and it's uncomfortable, and I don't know what to do about it because it's all going to fall apart. And so the teacher says, like whether it's Sri Ramana Maharshi or whether it's a Zen teacher, who is mixed up in this thing? Who are you? Who asked this question? Show me. Find yourself. You say, well, that's just me. And he says, oh, come on. You? Don't make me laugh. See, so eventually the person feels very bugged because the teacher is calling his bluff. And you are not the Lord God in the Jehovah sense of Christianity, who is the cosmic technocrat, who knows all the answers to everything. But you are the Lord God in the Hindu sense, who is different, because the Hindu God doesn't know how he does everything, in the sense that he doesn't translate it into words. He can't explain it, because there's no point in explaining it. You open and close your hand without knowing how you do it, and yet you surely do it. But you can't put it into words how it happens, unless you're a physiologist. And then even so, it doesn't help you much to open and close your hand better than anybody else. See? So you do know how to do it, but you can't explain it. Because words are a very clumsy way of talking about something which from the standpoint of words and the standpoint of logic is a very, very complicated process. So if you ask Shiva how he dances the cosmos, he would say, I just do it. Like you say, well, I just open and close my hand. So the Guru says to you, listen, Shiva, don't kid me, that you're not Shiva. But you're just this thing called Mary Smith or John Doe, etc. Ha ha. And everybody says, uh-oh, you can't admit that, because, you see, if I did admit that, I would have to be considered responsible, and I would be considered crazy, and I would feel that I really was one with this whole scheme of things. And that's, you see, the secret that we don't let the children know. In all, well, not in all, but in many cultures, initiation into manhood consists precisely in finding that out. They finally get around to saying to you, after all, we've been pretending all this time that you were just this little boy or little girl, but now we're going to let you in on the real story. But not in this culture. That's the problem. In this culture, we do have an initiation into adult life called psychoanalysis. And everybody is ruined by education. And then, this can't be helped because they have to know all the conventions. And just like to preserve beef, you make it salt. And when you're going to cook it, you have to soak the salt out of it. So in the same way, to make a child a tolerable companion, you have to... yeah, it's going still. You have to be salted with education. Then when that mixes up all your natural instincts, you have to be psychoanalyzed in order to be straightened out and cured of your education, cured of your upbringing. But the difficulty is, you see, that the assumptions of psychoanalysis and of a good deal of psychotherapy in various types and schools do not include the insight that you are basically the works. They have, in other words, that's simply because, historically speaking, psychotherapy originated in the 19th century and therefore still carries on the 19th century assumptions about the nature of the universe. And all those 19th century assumptions about the universe were a put-down. They included the myth, you see, that the universe is actually blind energy. It is essentially stupid. And man's intelligence and man's values and man's consciousness are a fluke in the world. And so this myth is that the world, man, in other words, is not a symptom of the world, like an apple tree is a symptom. An apple is a symptom of an apple tree. But man is a fluke, a kind of a joke, a chance. And that to be realistic and hard-headed and factual, in other words, a strong man, you must realize that you are caught in this trap and face the facts. So then, this, for the West at any rate, this 19th century philosophy of man's place in the world and his identity has become the most plausible common sense. In other words, people say they are Christians, they say they are Jews, they say they are Theosophists, Vedantists, Buddhists, etc., etc., but they are not. because they know in their heart of hearts, whatever they choose to believe, that the world is as described in the 19th century myth, because that's become our common sense. If people were Christians, they'd be screaming in the streets. They're not screaming in the streets. They'd be taking full-page ads. They'd be sponsoring TV programs about the tremendous urgency of this Christian bit, and they're not doing anything of the kind. A few Jehovah's Witnesses are doing it, but even they are fairly polite when they come to your front door. They show no urgency, really. So they don't believe it, because the plausible myth of our age is the myth of the fully automatic model of the universe, in which man is a fluke, and which he doesn't really belong. He's a chance operation, and when you're dead, and that's all there is to it. And that's so plausible that really almost everyone believes in it, without realizing that it is made out of whole cloth. It's nothing but a myth. It's a way of looking at things, a way of striking an attitude. But this is the powerful, powerful idea that governs our children, and that gives us our sense of basic identity, alienation, so that we live always in expectation of a future, which of course never happens. Well, it's enough for me for the moment. Which could be called matter, or spirit, or humanity, just to take an example. Every individual human being is an instance of something called mankind. And mankind is a real entity. You'd say, too, the United States of America is a real entity. And all these individual examples of it are, as it were, members of a body constituted by the real mankind, or the state, or the society, or the church, or the whatever. In contradistinction, the nominalist says, all your so-called real natures are abstractions. There is no such thing as mankind. There are simply these individual people. And calling them all men is a way of identifying them, but there is no such thing as mankind. In the same way, there is no such thing as the United States. There are all these people living here who imagine that they're the United States and call themselves that. But the United States as such has no physical existence, because when you say the policy of the United States towards Russia is thus and so, you don't mean the policy of the geographical territory. And nominalism, you see, is a very big thing for the followers of Korzybski and for all logical analysts and so on. Because they take the point of view, the whole thing in Korzybski is that you mustn't just go around calling things dogs, but you must recognize there is Fido sub 1, Fido sub 2, and Fido sub 3. And so this helps you, as the song says, to see each doggy differently. So the idea in semantics is this tremendous precise accuracy of getting the details clear, seeing that not every colored man is a nigger, not every Chinese is a chink, not every Italian is a wop. You see? Now, of course, yes, there's the richness of detail. But these are philosophical fashions that go back and forth between the prickly-minded people and the gooey-minded people. The prickly-minded people are the nominalists, and they like to emphasize the details, the atomic, discontinuous structure of things. The gooey-minded people like to emphasize the great connected generalities. The the way things form into bodies. But you see very clearly what happens if you press nominalism to its logical conclusion. The answer is there are no people. There are only amalgamations of cells. What you really are these cells. Or you want to go further, say what you are is only these electrons. That's all there is, you see. And this idea that they add up in some way to a person is just an abstraction. You're not really there, you see. They're just all that. Now, wait a minute, Mr. Nominalist. Suddenly, you are beginning to turn into a believer in Maya. What's your step, you see? If you push anybody far enough philosophically, they all arrive at the same place. You suddenly tell me you don't believe human beings really exist. There are only these atoms. Well, well, well. So I suppose we can argue the same thing about connections in time. Melody is then an illusion. There are only the individual notes, after all. If you're going to be a nominalist, then melody is something that just doesn't exist at all. Okay? Well, that's almost what the Buddhists say. When I was explaining to you this morning, the moment, and you don't connect the moments, there's only one moment, you know, this thing. Well, that's saying the same thing the same way. It's saying that all the connections are an illusion. So you push your nominalist right into the corner. You say the only things that exist are the multiplicity of atoms, and actually they only exist now. See, because you can't even say it. Only this moment is real. The ultimate hairline. You see, that's why the precisionist is making watches that have hairlines narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower, so they can only be seen by amazing microscopes. Exactly, they want to know when does that thing cross that thing. Boing. See? So eventually they're going to get down and down and down. And the universe has no time to exist in, therefore it doesn't exist, therefore it's an illusion. That was what bugged Zeno when he got the paradox of motion. So now either an arrow is somewhere or it isn't. If it's moving, it isn't anywhere. But it's obvious if it isn't anywhere,